Well, of course, social media is useful because it opens a window in countries where we used to have no window at all. I mean, there are many countries where professional journalists have no access at all. So at least we see a little bit of what goes on. The best example is Syria. It's very difficult for professional journalists to go in Syria. So at least social media gives us, through Twitter, for instance, indication of what is going on, the demonstrations, how the regime tries to stop those demonstrations, even killing people apparently. We get some images, although not very clear images, but we have an indication that something is going on and that the regime is pushing back those demonstrations very strongly. But of course, these are very incomplete images. We don't know who is sending us those pictures, who is making those comments. We don't know how reliable they are. So it's better than nothing, but it is not professional journalism, and we don't know whether it's reliable or to what extent it's reliable or not. Well, at first, I mean, all the media were very prudent, very careful, because we had, first of all, we had no pictures. There was a rumor that he had been found, that he was hurt, maybe he was dead, so it was very incomplete. So we used the conditional tense for a few hours. And in fact, what happened is that all media waited for an official word from, be it the UN or the United States or Western governments, and they themselves, I guess, waited for official word from their secret services and things like that. So we were all very careful because, of course, we had none of our own people. Even CNN didn't have any of their own people on the field to really confirm what had happened. So you have to be very, very careful and wait for official word, really. And even we cannot accept, like the Transitional Council there, we cannot really accept their word because we don't know, even for them, who speaks for them and whether they're reliable or not. Milosevic, in fact, he used professional media because he knew how to use them, right? He knew how the Western media could be used. So it's true of any media. I mean, professional media obviously will fight back, but they can be used. And I mean, Western political leaders know how to use their media. They know how to use the media. So, and social media or amateur media are, of course, very vulnerable. And you can see in countries that have succeeded in crushing professional media, they're trying to do the same thing with citizens who are trying to, send news to Western countries, and they are, they don't have their companies to back them. They're not insured. They're in their basement trying to send information, and they are very vulnerable. And they can be used. Of course, it's very easy for a government to use, to pretend that there's someone else, that they're a dissident or a citizen, and they're in their basement. So it's true of any media, and that's why we have to be very, very careful. And it's true of opposition parties in those countries. I mean, it would be very easy for a political leader, a dissident in Syria, to send news in the Western democracies and pretend that there's been 55 people killed in a demonstration. So we have to be careful, and that's why, in the end, obviously, the best solution is to have professional media everywhere, so that we can have a more complete information on what goes on. But of course, in some countries, it's not possible. Well, it's a constant dilemma, not only for genocides, but of course, genocide is the worst case. In the end, you have to show what reality is, right? So you have to do it with, if possible, good taste. You have to, I mean, you don't have to show, 200 pictures. Maybe one picture is enough. You have to do it, but I mean, you don't have to exaggerate, but you have to show what reality is. So it's in those cases when you send a reporter in a very difficult situation, and what you receive through their text or the pictures that are taken, you may have very graphic, horrible stuff. So you have to make a choice, and you do it collectively, and you try to choose stuff that is telling, that will move people, that will give an indication as to how horrific this is, and yet not do it so much that people will just, not look at it. Because in the end, what you want people to feel or to realize what is going on, but you don't want people to react, oh, this is so horrible, I won't read it or I won't look at it. So these are difficult choices, and you make them daily. And in the end, and it's true for any news organizations, you tend to know your readers. You know who is reading, and you know how they react, and so you know where you can go without going too far. But our role in the end is showing what is going on. So you can't censor yourself too much. In a way, it may be too early to say this, because when the mission first started, the goal obviously was to protect Libyan citizens against what the regime was doing, or at least was threatening to do. So what is how now that that Gaddafi is dead and his regime has been destroyed, how many people have been killed? Were there more people killed by the war than there would have been? It's difficult to say this. And what will happen now? What will be in power? Will the new government put in place of Gaddafi's be stable? Will civil war erupt? And if it does, what will be the human cost of this civil war if it does erupt? So it's very difficult. I think what's happening in Libya is in fact indicative of the whole dilemma of R2P. What is the goal, the short-term goal? And once you've let's say you've succeeded in realizing that short-term goal, once you leave, what happens? So it's, and I think Canadians in a way reacted differently depending on what are the stages of the mission. At first, I think that most Canadians were favorable to Canada's participation because they saw that we were trying to help poor Libyans from what would have happened to them. If we're still in Libya 3 months from now or 6 months from now, people will probably change their minds. And if we learn a year from now that the government in power in Libya is cracking down against dissidents, against them, we may again change our views as to whether this intervention was really a success or not. So I think we have to wait a little bit before declaring that mission a success, and maybe Mr. Harper's speech yesterday was a little bit too early.